When it comes to cartoon characters, how many can you name? Presumably dozens upon dozens. But how many can you name from the silent era of animation? That is much more challenging. But the first one likely to come to mind has to be Felix the Cat. Created in 1919, Felix is one of the first recurring cartoon characters ever, predating even Mickey Mouse's Steamboat Willie by 9 years. Felix's story would see him begin as a common house cat, but would evolve over time. In the 1920s, he would adopt more of a mischievous persona, often getting himself out of precarious situations using his wits and sometimes fists, while the 1950s would change him altogether into a wholesome figure, playing the part of a good-hearted hero and introducing his yellow magic bag of tricks, which could transform into anything he desired it to become. This was the character's standard identity for years to come, until the property would be revisited in an entirely new show, 1995's The Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat. Picking specific aspects from the character's rich history, the series sought to bring back Felix's original impishness, combined with the more well-known qualities surrounding the franchise, namely his magic bag and varying side characters. This endeavor resulted in the single most bold and unique project the character has ever been subjected to, surprisingly more reminiscent of Ren and Stimpy than anything in its own past. And it shows in every way, from the surreal madcap humor to the larger-than-life citizens and world he inhabits. But would the new radical direction work in the show's favor? Or was it too far off the deep end for audiences to connect with? Let's set the record straight on the Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat. With any good cartoon, a good indication of what you're about to watch will be told through its opening theme song. And there isn't any show that prepares you more for what's to come with less context than this one. Felix flies in his magic bag before turning into a 3D animated version of himself, and back again to hand-drawn animation, as it pans over a scene of the most surreal imagery. Winged, floating eyeballs, a black and white checkerboard, a happy dragon blowing smoke from his nose, an alien band, ending by closing on a character spotlight of Felix laughing, all over a shredding guitar, and the word "twisted" being quietly shouted in the background. It gives a perfect glimpse on what to expect from the show, and that's to not know what to expect. The Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat has a 30-minute runtime, and within that, 2 to 3 individual segments. Each segment would stand on its own, but most interesting is the obvious change of direction the show would go through at multiple points in its lifetime. But we can't begin to discuss these changes without diving into the cartoon itself, and the best place to start is with the first episode. Right away, the most noticeable feature of the cartoon is its visual style. Evocative of the animation from the 1920s and 30s, its influence is exhibited in every shot, from rubber hose movements to every object on screen possessing sentience in white gloves. The show acting as an ode to the groundbreaking art that was the first step in the still evolving animation industry. The artwork presented doesn't seek any attempt at realism or even detail, instead opting to focus on endless creativity scene and scene after scene, utilizing the most mundane objects and backgrounds for spontaneous laughs, as we'll see throughout. The plots are also given secondary focus, which makes sense considering how they commonly last only around 7 minutes, but they always catch you by surprise, never leading you down a path you thought you'd ever encounter when finally presented with it. Take for instance the debut episode, Guardian Idiot, where Felix gets kidnapped by a chef who prepares to put him in a meat grinder and serve him to his customers. Admittedly, it's not the deepest of plots, but it is funny, and goes in a direction that's totally unexpected. The customers at the restaurant are as meat obsessed as the chef, with one of the women eating multiple hamburgers, the plate, and eventually, the person she's sitting across from. It's quick and totally out of nowhere, but it's so funny and leads into the chef singing a song about how great meat is
Food is better when it's meaty. Here, have a scrumptious treaty.
Like my T-bone sweetie.
Meat, meat, meat.
And that's the kind of offbeat comedy you'll be getting throughout the series' entirety. We next cut to Felix, who's working as a street performer, playing his banjo for a crowd of people, and afterwards soliciting donations. But instead of holding out a hat to collect the money, he takes off the top of his head, ears and all, as the crowd shrieks, but it's such a brief scream, you're more surprised by its brevity than the sound itself.
Freeloaders.
Twisted Tales also has the most dramatic departure from Felix's trademark voice. Normally high-pitched and jolly, this version, performed by Tom Adcox Hernandez, known for his roles in Gargoyles and Young Justice, has a youthful raspiness to him, someone who has street smarts from years of having to take care of himself, but still wide-eyed when he comes across new friends and foes across his adventures.
So, let me get this horizontal. You're from Lightning Land, you need to get back home, but your power's been drained, so you need a place to stay to nurse yourself back to full wattage.
Felix is captured by the chef, and as he approaches the meat grinder, which gnashes its teeth hungrily, churning its own grinder, Felix then screams for help so loudly it reaches heaven, where a bumbling guardian angel in training answers his call, transporting Felix to wherever he wishes. Of course, he misinterprets all of Felix's requests, sending him to the bottom of the ocean, and when he wishes to go somewhere dry, he's teleported to the desert. It's what Felix does in these locations that take the episode to another level though. When he's in the depths of the sea, he lands on a sunken ship, accosted by the deceased pirate crew that inhabits it. It's here we get to see one of my favorite traits given to Felix, the ability to use his tail as an object. When approached by one of the pirates, Felix defends himself by taking his tail off of his body and using it as a sword. I absolutely love this, and it makes for all sorts of imaginative solutions to problems, such as using his tail as a flashlight. My favorite instance of this is when he needs to roll a 13 on a pair of dice, which obviously only go up to 12, so when a question mark appears over his head, he takes the dot at the bottom of the punctuation, slaps it onto one of the dice, and rolls. These sorts of manipulations are common throughout the series, and are some of the moments I look forward to most. Felix also has the ability to morph into an ink blot, a black amorphous blob that gives him the power to hide in blackness, from more obvious spaces such as shadows, to things you'd never expect, like hiding in the spot on the side of a cow. He also uses this dematerializing to turn into ink and slide under doors, and split himself apart and regroup after going through tight spaces. It adds another dimension to what Felix can do and how he goes about his daily life and problems. It's not played up too often, so it feels special when he does choose to do it. Everything that can be used as a gag is effectively used, from a panicked scream where his skull remains in place while his skin stretches far above, to when he bumps into the sculptured figures at the end of the ship chatting with each other. It feels like every single moment has potential to be used for comedy. It can be totally nonsensical at times, most times even, with Felix traversing the desert, only to see an old man in a rocking chair in a snowy cabin in the middle of the sweltering heat, who angrily scolds him.
Move along. I'm in my own little world here.
There's no before or after regarding this gag, it's just inexplicably funny. The episode ends with Felix being tied back up about to go headfirst into the grinder, until the chef wishes for the angel to make him the biggest, greasiest sausage in the world, which the angel misinterprets, leading to the chef switching places with Felix and going into the meat grinder himself. It's a whirlwind of an episode that moves a mile a minute, but you're constantly engaged with all the random gags placed in every episode, and they're so varied. A few of my personal top choices being when a patron at a carnival wins a game, so he wins a doll, which the carny blows up and becomes a live woman, taking the term doll to a new level. There's one where Felix unrolls a can of sardines to illogically logical results, and my favorite of the entire series, Felix's conversation with the moon, which feels like a prime Family Guy joke.
Right.
I don't write these gags, Felix. I
You
just say them.
say them, I know.
There is one joke that did surprise me for how in the vein of Ren and Stimpy it is. And it's when Felix is imprisoned on Mars, and his sentence is that he has bones to pick, and he must pick them quick, as we pan over to maniacally laughing, particularly shaped trees. There are a few adult jokes hidden in the series, but this is the most blatant, and because it was in writing, I can see how they snuck it past the censors. As the series progressed, the completely absurd episodes that were less plot-focused were slowly shed in favor of still wacky, but more story-based shows. And this was around the time that Felix's friends began popping up, and he's surrounded by a small but entertaining group that Felix plays well off of. There is Roscoe, his slow but always kind-hearted best friend, Seamus T. Goldcrow, a private eye who enlists Felix to help solve criminal cases, Sheba Bebop Reba, his hipster beatnik pal, and Candy Kitty and Natasha Slinky, both frequent love interests of Felix. The characters do bring Felix into more conventional narratives, rather than the stream of consciousness feeling episodes that the series started with, and it is nice to have concrete stories, such as Felix and Seamus having to discover who stole an ancient Egyptian cheese. The only character I don't feel elevated Felix in some way, be it story or dynamics-wise, is Sheba. She's a groovy cat clad in a beret and leather jacket, and while the idea of her as this cool cat with effortless swagger are good on paper, she doesn't have a distinct enough personality in any particular direction, and it feels like a wasted character, never being loony enough to be funny, or straight enough to warrant being part of the hijinks. As far as villains go, the season 1 standout has to be Peking Duck, an utterly malevolent magician. Wanting to steal Felix's bag for his own gain, he's evil enough in his own right, but the character is made entirely by voice actor Tony Jay, who may be most known as Claude Frollo in Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He's helped by his 2 henchmen, a giant chicken named Wonton and a tiny one named Mushu, who are the subject of many of Felix's more physical punishments while pursuing him. And the 3 are so funny together, I wish they were in more episodes than they appeared in. Season 1 showed a gradual change over time, moving from the absurd, free-flowing shorts to incorporating more secondary characters and pointed scenarios. Whichever version you prefer, the series did feel like it was beginning to find its identity, and would continue in that direction, albeit with some major changes. The first being the change to Felix's voice. Now, Tom Adcox Hernandez was the current voice of Felix in this cartoon, but his position wasn't as permanent as one may believe. In an interview with Adcox Hernandez, he notes that he read for Felix 9 times over the period of a year, and after beating out Pee Wee Herman himself, Paul Reubens, and Big Bang Theory's Mayim Bialik, he secured the role. But when sweeping changes came for season 2, namely replacing the writing staff, Adcox Hernandez too was replaced by Charlie Adler, one of the great voice actors known for playing Buster Bunny in Tiny Toon Adventures and Ickis in Ah Real Monsters. And Adler is great, giving a more conventionally cartoon voice, probably due to how similar it is to how he voiced Ickis, just without the excited wheezing.
The people who paint the backgrounds for this cartoon didn't finish this one. Hello? Hey, background people!
With new voices for both Felix and the creative team, Season 2 seemed primed for a fresh start. One part the second season greatly improved on was the replacement of less impactful characters. Gone are Candy Kitty and Sheba, and in their place, we have characters from the previous Felix the Cat cartoons. It's a shock when they appear, both because they're unexpected, not having appeared in any of the first season, and because when they do appear, they're so good. The smallest cameos are from the Professor, seen originally in the 1950s series and subsequently the 1980s movie, and his dog cohort Rock Bottom. They're only in one episode and are interpreted differently, the Professor now looking more like a mad scientist, and Rock Bottom as extremely flamboyant. The better of the reappearances, though, has to be from the Master Cylinder, who works for an alien overlord attempting to destroy Earth. The Master Cylinder and Peking feel like the most capable bad guys, with Master Cylinder oozing wickedness from his metallic casing. One of the things I like best is, with the Professor as well, when they acknowledge that they have prior history. Master Cylinder brings up his annoyance with Felix always showing up to foil his plans, to which Felix replies, "And I always will." He also has one of the best jokes in the show.
That fool! Without me, there wouldn't be an invasion.
Did you say something?
Oh no!
Thought not.
Idiot.
Where the second season does divert from the first is with its meta commentary, especially on the show itself, even devoting an entire 2-part episode to the subject. The episode, The Fuzzy Bunny Show, begins with Felix's show being cancelled in favor of The Fuzzy Bunny Show, a Barney-like program that kids go wild for. The feverish tap dancing Felix does to try and appeal to kids, and his disbelief that he isn't as popular as he once used to be, is funny on its own. But what makes this one of the best episodes of the entire series is the blatant disdain they have for their child audience. The venom they attack with is piercing, and nothing short of hilarious, and you can see the influence of Ren and Stimpy all over this 2-parter. The kids are constantly drooling, and can barely put sentences together saying anything other than they love Fuzzy Bunny.
Mommy! That cat's scary! Oof.
It's ironically the most complete episode too. This is the one to watch. Season 1 and 2 are really fun in their own rights, but there are some creative decisions that some may understandably enjoy, but I would have liked to have seen done a little differently. First, Sheba needs to either be reworked or taken out of any major roles. As far as design goes, she looks good, but she has no character other than speaking like a beatnik, which isn't interesting enough to carry her. She can still be a less outlandish figure compared to the other characters, but then make her lean into a side of her persona that warrants including her at all. Maybe she can be an activist that drags Felix into protests. Being chained to a tree seems like something that could be great for the dementedness of this world. Or make her be ultra cool, influencing everything around her, from fashion to the world. There's a lot of ways this character could be better utilized, so it's sort of a letdown that she's so plain. The other improvement I would have liked to have seen that hovered like a dark cloud over the series was one of clear direction. As evidenced by the major turnover between Season 1 and 2, there were clearly larger issues at play behind the scenes, so I can't fault a production built on sand for being unstable. But it would have been beneficial for the show to have begun with a clear vision. I like the more eccentric episodes, but I also realize a series probably wouldn't last long being so freeform, so the partnering up seems like the way to go. But then the show becomes less unique when it sacrifices weird for coherent. It feels like the show's constantly trying to figure itself out, but unfortunately never quite finds its footing. The Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat would end after 2 years and 21 episodes, and it may have been for the best, as more changes appeared to be on the horizon. Adcorn Hernandez recounts that at some point during Season 2, quote, "They called me in again, and they said, 'We want to bring you back into Felix.' So I go in, and when I walk in the door, I see Mark Hamill, and he just got done reading for Felix, and he stopped me and he goes, 'Wait, don't you do Felix already?' And I go, 'Yeah.' And he goes, 'You do a great job. Why are they replacing you?' And I said, 'I don't know.'" From all indications, production on this series was more than complicated. From the rotating voice actors to totally replacing the writing team, the way the episodes were written, none of it is consistent. And in a business where so much of success is based off of luck, your product needs to be put in the best place to succeed. And that means getting everything in order before presenting the end result. Despite the short-lived run, The Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat still manages to offer an incredibly funny show, with gags that I still think about. If you're a fan of Felix the Cat, the golden age of cartoons, or just a comedy fan in general, there will be more than enough to appreciate here. And if after watching the series you find that you enjoyed it as much as I did, then maybe your sense of humor is more twisted than you thought.